we welcome former Swiss banker and accidental whistleblower Xavier André Justo and author Phil Whiteley. In 2015, Xavier leaked information to a British journalist that helped expose the Malaysian 1MDB scam, one of the largest financial frauds. The scandal is said to have contributed to the downfall of the sitting Prime Minister in the following election. After spending 18 months in a Thai prison on false charges, he was released in December 2016. He feels that whistleblowing is a choice which comes with consequences. In conversation with Xavier today is author and journalist Phil Whiteley, whose non-fiction focuses on the world of work. Having begun his writing career in 1988 as a trainee reporter for the trade magazine Printing World, Philip went on to author several books centered around fairness in workplaces. Welcome, Xavier and Philip.
Thank you very much. Welcome everyone to this session on whistleblowing. My name is Phil Whiteley, and I'm a journalist and author and ghostwriter by profession. And my interest in whistleblowing has come about because from time to time whistleblowers will come to us because other processes such as the regulator and the legal processes have failed. And you may think that we only get the weak cases, but that has not been my experience. I have observed that defense or protection for whistleblowers can be weak and that there is an oppressive playbook often used by major employers and their legal representatives against whistleblowers. And one of the victims of this playbook is our guest for this session. I'm not going to say too much more about his story because I think we should hear it from Xavier himself. Xavier, many thanks for joining us today. Could you describe what you reported and what the consequences of that were?
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It's a long and complicated case, so I'll try to make it brief. I started my career in 1987 in Switzerland, in Geneva, in the banking industry. And I spent 20 years in the banking industry. I left, I sold my company in 2009. I went to live in Asia with my girlfriend, who now is my wife. And in 2010, I received a call from a very good friend of mine, my best friend at that time, Mr. Tarek Obeid, who had a small company at that time called Petro Saudi, with a beautiful name, but that was pretty much it, a beautiful name with almost no asset and no activity. But in 2010, he signed a deal with this famous 1MDB fund, the Malaysian sovereign fund, wealth fund, and he asked me to go to London to join him as the number 3 of the company to take care of some part of the business, mainly some contracts Petro Saudi had in Venezuela. So that's how it started, the Petro Saudi 1MDB experience.
And this was a sovereign wealth fund. Did it have some legitimate businesses or some businesses you were concerned about? What was the pattern that you observed?
So when I arrived in London in Petro Saudi, they explained to me, and it was a little bit related in the press, that the 1MDB, the Malaysian Sovereign Wealth Fund, sent money to Petro Saudi to be invested in anything related to oil industry. Of course, there were big numbers in the press. It was mentioned something like 2 billion. But inside the company in London, we never had access to the real numbers. Me being the number 3, I didn't know how much money, Malaysia really sent to this joint venture. But something that was strange is that in a joint venture, the principle of a joint venture is both parties have to bring something in. The Malaysian side was bringing hard cash. At the end, they invested 1.8 billion, and Petro Saudi had to bring in something. But they had no assets, and I know that as a fact because I was the director of the company until 2009, September 2009, and Petro Saudi received these billions in October 2009. So what they did, but I discovered that much later, is that they pretended to have oil fields in Turkmenistan. And the way to do it, to show that they had these 3 billion in assets, was through something which is called a farming agreement. I don't want to go into too much detail because we will spend too much time, but it's a kind of a lease. You don't have the ownership of the oil fields. But they found a guy, a very well-known guy in the world of the oil business, that was willing, and he was well paid for 3 days of work, to evaluate these oil fields that didn't belong to PetroSaudi, but he put that as PetroSaudi assets. So that's how the scam was created, bringing fake assets and receiving the hard money.
So from the sound of it, you were unhappy about a lack of auditing, and as a director yourself, you could have been liable.
No.
So was that the situation?
No. To be very, very precise and very honest, I spent a year in London. I was taking care of the Venezuela side of the business. We had 2 drill ships there. So this side of the business was great, was very interesting. But there were things that I didn't like, and they were more personal than professional. There is a saying that when people receive a lot of money, they can become crazy. I saw that. So these 2 people, Patrick Mahoney and Tarek Obeid, they received more than almost 200 million as commissions. And they started with the wild partying and wild behaving, and that was something that I didn't want to participate. So we had a dispute, and I left the company in April 2011. But until that time, I didn't really see illegal things.
Okay.
It was strange because, for example, Tarek Obeid immediately bought a flat in Mayfair for something like £8 million. Patrick Mahoney bought a house in Notting Hill for, I think, 6.5 million. He bought a chalet in the Swiss Alps for around 10 million. Every time we were flying, so first class was not good enough. It was only private jets. Not to mention, every time we went to a restaurant, they were always choosing the most expensive bottles that they paid £10,000, even £20,000. So there was a lot of money running around. But if you don't have the proof, you can't say that's a scam. But there was a lot of money, but it's oil business, so we don't need to be naive. Oil business means commissions, but something it's a 3 to 5% commission, and another thing it's 80% commission, because at the end that's what happened. Out of the 1.8 billion that Malaysia sent to PetroSaudi, 1.5 billion were diverted as commission for Tarek Obeid, Patrick Mahoney, the former son of the King of Saudi Arabia, Jolo, Najib Razak, and many other people.
And when did you realize that something was seriously wrong, and what did you do about that?
So I left PetroSaudi in 2011, in April. In May, June, I received a copy of the server of PetroSaudi through the IT guy of PetroSaudi, who was one of my friends. So I went back to Asia, and in this hard drive, there is 227,000 emails in 4 different languages, and not sequential. So it will take more than a lifetime to go through all of them. But I had other businesses in Thailand, but from time to time on weekends, I was just plugging the hard drive and running through the documents, and I saw a couple of strange documents, huge transfer, but nothing that I could say, this is the scam, this is the smoking gun. And in June 2014, so after 3 years in Asia, I was contacted by a UK journalist, Claire Castle-Brown, that used to have a blog on the Malaysian corruptions, let's say. She came to visit me in Bangkok, and we started to discuss, and it started from there. She explained to me a little bit how this 1MDB corruption machine was working, who this Jolo was, and we went through a little bit of the documents, but I gave them a few documents, and it started from there.
And what happened as a consequence from that?
So when we met, and I'm very open and honest about this, so she was very interested. We found a couple of really disturbing documents, and she asked me, how can I get the file? And I said, that's the truth. I said, Claire, if I'm going to give you that, I will need to receive the money that PetroSaudi owe me. Because when I left PetroSaudi, I left with some signing documents, and I signed documents, a contract, but there was also a moral engagement. But that's not really important. PetroSaudi owe me like 2 million, and I said, Claire, I'm not doing that for the money. I could try to sell those documents. I mean, I have the email address of Jolo, the Najib Razak entourage. I could try to sell that, and not for 2 million, probably for 20 million, even 50 million. I want that money because I do presume that I will face some problems if I give you that. I was not imagining the kind of problems that I will endure later, but that's how it started, and it took her a few months to call me back and to tell me that there was a guy in Singapore in the media domain, because I didn't want to have anything to do with politics. And this media owner was a Malaysian Singaporean businessman. So I met with the guy in February 2015, and we spent the whole day discussing about Malaysia, 1MDB, and Jolo. And those people, they had the hard knowledge. They knew exactly. So whenever they saw a document, they were immediately relating that to this transaction and that transaction. So they had the knowledge, but they were lacking the evidences and the proof.
So the investigative journalists in Malaysia were interested in it
Very much
as a story, but you had the hard evidence to back up their suspicions. But then what happened to you personally?
I mean, of course, PetroSaudi after that said that I was just trying to sell the data, but I didn't sell the data. After a day of discussion and realizing how this corruption machine was stealing money from poor people, because even Malaysia, if you go to Kuala Lumpur, you will get the impression that Malaysia is a rich country. In a way, it's a rich country. I never saw more Lamborghinis than in Kuala Lumpur, and I've been living in London, Geneva, and other countries. But this is like in this kind of countries, the money is only for the elite. So there is a lot of poor people in Malaysia, farmers, fishermen. So after realizing that they were stealing money from those people, I gave the data to the owner. Say, if you want to pay me, pay me. If you don't, it's okay. We passed beyond the point of talking about money. Now we speak about morality and integrity, and it started like this.
And of course, the purpose of a sovereign wealth fund is economic development opportunities for low-income people.
It's building.
But you did not observe that occur.
No, the purpose is building infrastructure for the poor, building hospitals, increase the educational level, and so on. And it was only used for, as you may have seen in the press, for partying, financing movies in Hollywood, buying yachts, jets, and really nothing to do with investment.
But you were actually arrested on spurious charges, is that correct?
So the first article from Claire Castle-Brown and The Edge, the company of those people, was published end of January, early March 2015. So the scandal was big, but not worldwide at the time. It was pretty much a Malaysian or Asian scandal. So I was living in Koh Samui, a small island in Thailand, and I had the feeling I was immune to any consequences because Thailand and Malaysia, they don't go along very well. There are some disputes with the southern border, and I felt like it's okay, I'm immune. One of my biggest mistakes, if not my biggest mistake, is not to realize that when you steal billions, there is no border. There is no religion. There is only pure greed and protection of the stolen money.
And it's global. It's
global. There is no border for money. So in the 20th of June 2015, I had the great displeasure of being arrested in Thailand, in Koh Samui. And I don't want to go through too many details, but I was treated like a very important criminal. I was I was in the office of the number one of the police in Thailand, who, if you know the country, is like probably the 10th or the 6th most important guy in Thailand. And he introduced me to a guy. He said, this is a guy of Scotland Yard that wants to talk to you. And I was introduced to this guy, a British guy, that offered me a deal. He told me, you plead guilty, you will confess whatever we want you to confess, and you will be home in a few weeks. And I said, no, there is no way, I'm not going to confess. So they sent me to the worst cell in Thailand, and they led me there 3 days, 4 days. I really thought I was dying, because you can't imagine what is a Thai facility in a jail if you've never been there. And after 4 days, they came back and said, okay, you stick to your point, or you want to cooperate with us, and you will be home by Christmas. It was June, July. Christmas was a 6-month period. And I said, okay, I'm going to confess whatever you want. Give me the pen, give me your story, and I will write it. And I had no choice. I mean, yes, I could have said, I'm not pleading, I'm not doing anything. They said, you will go to spend 10 years there. And that was beyond comprehension. Yeah. So I did whatever they wanted. And I did with my confessions, I had some interviews with the press inside the prison, and I had also the delegation of Malaysia that came to interview me in prison, and it always was the same speech. I had to blame myself, to incriminate myself, to tell that Petro Saudi and the Malaysian Sovereign Wealth Fund was a legit deal, that I was working with the opposition, with the journalists, and that this was a political stuff.
There are 2 questions that arise from that. First of all, how did you survive that trauma? And secondly, I understand you have been vindicated. So the first question, how did you survive at the very worst moment?
Well, I mean, now I can speak with a kind of a smile, because there is so much anecdotes in my life in prison. But the very first week, I almost wished to die. Because just to give you, probably the audience is not really interested by the details, but anyway, I'll give you a few ones. In a Thai prison, you sleep on the ground like a dog. Right. And even not, my dog has a kind of mattress. So you sleep on, it's overcrowded. In a space of 40 square meters, you will have 50 people. You will sleep with the feet of your neighbor in your face. It's 45 degrees. There is one hole with a basket and some water, and you have 50 people that will spend 16 hours or 14 hours inside, that have to brush their teeth, to take kind of a shower, and do whatever the body needs to do. So the condition, humanly speaking, you can't even imagine what it is. So after a week, I was pretty much saying, if I have to spend there 10 years or die, I would have chosen die. But after, you start to get some visits from your family and friends. You will have the Swiss embassy that will support you. And when you have a family, if you have a caring wife, and don't forget, at that time, my first son, and my only son, was 8 months old. Oh, yeah. So you have something to fight for. Yeah. And when you're inside the Thai prison, I was sentenced to 3 years for attempted blackmail. I didn't attempt to blackmail anybody, but anyway, in Thailand, for attempted blackmail, you don't go to jail. They sentenced me to 6 years, but as I pleaded guilty, they cut the sentence in 2. 3 years, that in Thailand, you will get that as a bad pedophile. But they wanted me in jail to silence me. So after, and it goes like this. The first step, you make 1 month. I spent 1 month. After, you have the 100 days barrier. And it's like in the movies. You put a cross and you see other people. I've met nice people. I met a Bulgarian guy, a lovely guy, my age, with a son also of the age of my son. He was a kind of criminal, but he was doing these fake credit cards where you can copy the code and withdraw some cash from the ATM machines. He was sentenced because he stole $1,000, and he had 32 cards, plastic cards, non-coded. He was sentenced to 102 years. So maximum of the sentence by law was 50 years. Yeah. 50 years for $1,000 or euro. When you see that and you compare to your sentence, you say, okay, I'm in a deep shit, sorry for the word, but I can make it through. Those poor people, I have seen others with 19 years, it's okay, you are not in that bad position. And at the end, I was lucky because I got 2 amnesties. The first one, my sentence was reduced from 3 to 2 years. When you have done a year and you say, okay, you have another year to do, you say, okay, I've done half. It's like I used to do some training for an Ironman. So it was the same in my head. So when you do half of
that mental resilience.
Yes, you say, okay, now I'm the way back.
Yeah.
I reached the turning point. So whatever now, it's the easy part.
And bring us up to date, because one of the striking things I've noticed about your story is that overwhelmingly you have been vindicated, and the former Prime Minister was convicted, and yet your ordeal is not over. Can you explain to us why?
People may think that the day that you, in my case or in other cases, the day you leave the prison, life is normal again. It's just the start of a new life and a new fight, because now we have something that it's called internet and Google. So everybody will Google your name and they will reach their own conclusion. He did some jail time. We can't hire him. I was released 5 years ago. I haven't been able to find a proper job or stable job. I'm surviving on some consultancy jobs, some help, nobody wants to hire me. I'm a liability instead of being an asset. But that's what it is. Another thing, we discussed that together yesterday evening. There is an investigation opened by Switzerland against the Petro-Saudi guys, Tarek Obeid and Patrick Mahoney. They are under investigation for the last 5 years, not even charged, under investigation. I've been asked by the Swiss authorities to be a witness in their case, not to mention my case, in their case. So.
And what's the latest on that legal process?
So less than 2 years ago, I went to Bern to give my testimony. I spent 8 hours with my lawyer, and they came. There were 5 lawyers for Petro-Saudi. So the fight is unequal. And those people, there is an incredible story. It was hard for me to believe that when I discovered that. I discovered that 6 months ago. There is an amount that is frozen in London in an escrow account from a lawyer's office. There is 350 million. Petro-Saudi is theirs because it comes from a dispute they have with PDVSA, the Venezuela oil company. The U.S. justice wants the money because it's U.S. dollars and it comes from a crime. Malaysia wants the money because they said this has been paid with the help of the 1MDB money.
So they see it as Malaysian public money.
Yes. Yeah. Everybody wants that part. So pending the result of who is going to get that money, a U.S. judge has allowed for more than 5 years Petro-Saudi to withdraw part of that money monthly for legal and business purposes. They were allowed to withdraw per month $1 million.
Per month?
Per month, not per year, per month. Meaning everybody knows this is stolen money. This is money resulting from a criminal activity. But pending the final result, the U.S. justice has allowed criminals to receive $1 million per month. And they want me to fight against them without money.
And what resources do you have?
Nothing.
Yeah.
So just my spirit.
And this is the asymmetrical situation often facing a whistleblower, is that they're up against, if it's a large organization, effectively infinite resources. And yet the individual often has very limited resources.
As I told you, I have a book coming out in a couple of months. I'm expecting already to be sued from all the angles that they can get, because they have the money to do that. Before my last testimony in Switzerland, and you can Google that, there was a press campaign against me. It's always the same story, shoot the messenger. Yeah. So nobody in the good press or in the important press is believing their story anymore. So they use bloggers in India, in Russia, and so on, if you put Xavier Justo, criminal or pound, you will see 2 years ago, just a week before my testimony with the Swiss authorities, is the same article. After a thorough investigation, after a deep investigation, my team and I uncovered the fact that Xavier Justo, in fact, is not a whistleblower, is working for the Spanish drug cartel. I'm the accountant of Spanish drug cartel. I mean, I barely survive on a 3,000 to 4,000 euros a month of budget. So this criminal organization doesn't pay well their accountant. But that's how they work. They discredit you through the press, they draw you on legal fees, and they hope to survive with that. And we give them the ability to survive. How on earth a judge could mentally be able to say, okay, this is stolen money, but it will take a few years before we decide who is getting the cake, but take $1 million per month. $1 million per month.
And it's extraordinary, isn't it, that it's such an unequal battle when really, in a democracy, the legal system ought to make the contest equal and more fair.
There is another example how unfair the fight is. So there is an investigation that Switzerland, the country, has opened against them for aggravated money laundering, bribery of foreign official, and 3 others. And there is also a complaint that I did, that my wife and I did. We filed against them for other charges, manipulation, endangering life, and so on. So there is 2 investigations, actually, in Switzerland against them. One, the Swiss authority one. I'm a witness. They they pay my ticket and some food to help them in their case as a witness. But at the same time, 3 years ago, Switzerland, that is asking for my help, they opened an investigation against me for industrial espionage because I leaked the data to the press. So it's not only that I have to fight billionaires, but in a way I still have to fight against my country or defend myself from my country. So it's not that the fight is unequal, it's unfair, it's immoral, it's unethical. But that's the situation, and we're talking about Switzerland, 2022. We are not talking about not so developed countries. That's the way it is. That's this real situation.
And that is a situation you come across as a journalist. I've often reflected is that a lot of organisations have a cover-up culture. So you get into trouble for telling the truth to a journalist, but the press office doesn't get into trouble for giving a misleading statement. And it sounds like that's been a dynamic there, this presumably spurious espionage.
No. And also the power of these people with money is the power to influence the press. And now I have some friends as journalists, and I've seen how it works. Sometimes you will want to write a real article with facts. The criminals will write to your boss, to the chief editor, say, if you publish something against us, we have not been judged by the justice, we are going to sue you, and we are going to demand you 100 million. So quite often, the journalist can't do his job because the chief editor or the boss say, hey, we can't fight them.
That has definitely been the case, that a journalist has filed an investigative piece and the legal department of the newspaper or the news channel has blocked it because of those threats.
Yeah,
that has absolutely happened, yes. Is there anything, Xavier, that you would do differently if you would have your time?
I had that question a few times. I will do the same because it's who I am. It's what I've been like this. My father taught me to be like this. My mother taught me. But when I see the result, as of today, I'm bankrupt. They stole a year and a half of my life with my son. Sorry, I don't want to get emotional.
No, do get emotional.
No.
It's only human.
And the thing is, I have a good life, I have a good wife, I have a good son, but it's a daily struggle. It's a daily struggle, you have no idea. It's, today is the 10/11, I hope to pay my rent at the end of the month. Knowing that, for example, Mr. Mahoney has a nice chalet in the Swiss Alps. Maybe it's seized, but he enjoyed his last winter in this chalet in Stad. Mr. Obaid is partying like nobody has ever happened. So I'm suffering because of my decision. That's something I have to live with. That, but my wife and my son, they don't need to suffer because of my own actions. That's not fair. I'm suffering. That's okay. It's not my mistake. I had to do that because it was a moral decision. But seeing that we are the only one paying a hard price and they're still enjoying life like nothing has happened, that the US justice is helping them, that Switzerland is investigating me. By doing so, it's in the public domain. So every time I've seen an employer say, we love you, Xavier, we love your story, we love your bravery, but you are kind of a reputational risk. Is that fair? I don't think so. Is there something I can do? No. Will I do this? Will I do the same? Will I do the same? Yes, because that's what I have to do, because that's who I am.
And with all the whistleblowers I've met and interviewed, they have that same feeling that, they couldn't not speak out. They felt they had a duty to. But it changes your whole career, and you become a whistleblower for the rest of your life, even though in every case, that I've come across, that was never their ambition. They wanted to be a banker or a lawyer or a doctor. Yeah. And they didn't want to be a whistleblower, but they felt they had to speak out. So it becomes your profession almost through, without it having been your career plan.
Absolutely. Nobody was born a whistleblower. No. There is no study to become a whistleblower. It's just in some industries, like probably the finance industry, you will get more choices. I had the choice at one stage of my life. Shall I do something, or I just close my eyes and I continue my path? And I choose the option of being what I think it's a good human being.
Congratulations. And we do have some questions coming in from people watching. I was going to ask you just one final question myself. What advice would you give to regulators and to companies in order to provide more support for people coming forward?
I don't have a proper answer for that. Sometimes you have a good company policy about whistleblowing, but the policy of the state is not correlated with that. Or if your company is willing to help you, but you will suffer the price with the state, like in my case, being under investigation because I leaked something outside of the company. My major mistake, if I go back in time, is I did it by myself. I said, okay, give that to the press and you will be fine. Now you can use, you have lawyers specialized in whistleblowing. You have those kinds of companies. So you just access these people and don't do it by yourself, thinking that you can do it by yourself. It's wrong. You can't fight those kind of criminals by yourself.
You need allies.
It's an equal battle.
The first question we have coming in, because we only have a few minutes left. What was the motive of the Thai government, do you know, for doing what they did, or prosecuting authorities?
It's just called money. I love Thailand. My son was born in Thailand, but it became a military regime 7 years ago, 8 years ago now. And as I said, with those kind of amount of money, there is no more borders, religion. You can bribe pretty much everybody. So they were paying a lot of money. And I have another example of the cooperation between Malaysia and Thailand. I was supposed to go back to my country with a kind of a treaty after a year in prison. So it was even in the press, even the Thai minister confirmed that I was going to be transferred to Switzerland. But Najib Razak came to Thailand a week prior to my departure, and out of nowhere, my transfer was denied. So the power of money and the power of the relationship that goes with the money, it was nothing else than money.
And it's a lot of systems of accountability are at a national level. But of course, as you say, money flows globally in vast sums, doesn't it? So it makes it harder and harder to have that kind of accountability. And we have another question. How did you get the boldness to do the whistleblowing, and what really drove you? Was it your integrity to do the thing, or accountability to speak up and right the wrongs that you saw? You partially answered that, but a bit more depth on that would be interesting.
I think you can call it integrity. And I don't know, I mean, I hope that everybody watching everybody in the audience will do the same. When you see something bad, or like an accident, it's either you try to help or you walk away. It's at the end, whatever it's the financial crimes or seeing an accident, you have the choice to intervene, to do something good. That was my only motivation. You can't spend, I spent 8 hours with Claire Castle-Brown, with people from Malaysia, explaining you into details what was what they did with the money, how it worked, and just say, oh, I don't care.
And what are the prospects for you now? I understand you're giving talks, you're still getting some interest and some coverage. Do you have any optimism that the issue will finally be settled and the truth will out?
It's difficult. I'm 56, Phil. I'm not really probably attractive as a young worker for a company, but I don't feel like being a liability. I feel like being an asset for a company. So time will tell. I'm not giving up the fight. We have this book project that is taking a lot of our time and giving us a lot of optimism, and we will see.
Is there another question? Is there any kind of international network or support for whistleblowers? Because again, like the systems of accountability, the organisations are often at a national level, aren't they?
I've seen a few ones, which is good, but everybody has its own story, so it's difficult. I don't know. I don't know if we help to have a global whistleblowing association. I don't know, but it's growing, and I think the more noise is made, the better it will be.
And I asked earlier a bit about advice. What advice would you give to whistleblowers? You mentioned one in that try to gain allies and some kind of support and not do everything on your own. Is there any other advice?
No, it's really, if you feel like you have to do something, first you have to think that it's not an easy act. It goes with consequences. They don't need to be as dramatic as mine, but life will never be the same again. But be prepared and go through professionals. They will give you good and strong advices.
And in terms of advice for employers and regulators, presumably, I mean, perhaps you would be in a good position to advise them and in terms of compliance.
We said it many times. I mean, a whistleblower, a human being that sees something bad and wants to report it is a good human being.
Yeah.
And for a company, that's an asset, unless you don't want to have those kind of people looking too much into details on what your company is doing. If you really care about the ethics of your company, help those people, promote those people.
It's interesting that when there was an article in Harvard Business Review recently about where they interviewed people who were in prison because of corporate wrongdoing, and they said that they didn't set out to do that, but it was a toxic culture. And in a toxic culture, wrongdoing just goes unpunished, and you get motivated to hit the numbers.
I mean, I've been speaking with friends. I had some events in Switzerland, with not official events, like going to a dinner with traders in the banking system, in the old business. And half of them say, it's incredible what you have done, but I will not do it. Because I knew and I know it's a losing battle. I'm not saying this is good or bad. That's the reality. Half of them say, oh, I wouldn't have touched that.
But the risk with not whistleblowing is that you yourself could face prosecution if the authorities turn against that company that is.
But apparently authorities are not strongly acting.
No, and parts of the economy, sadly, are not thoroughly or rigorously regulated, especially in a global context. I think we have time for one more question. Is that correct? Yes, I'm getting the nod there. And how has this affected you personally? And would you say that going to prison ultimately affected the industry for the good? And that would it make a scandal like this less likely in that part of the world?
I started my banking career in 1987. Now it's 35 years later. In 1987, you could open a bank account in Switzerland, Geneva. You could just enter any bank carrying bags of cash, probably with still blood inside, open a bank account. The guy will ask you, where's this money coming from? He will say, real estate. He will just write real estate.
Okay.
35 years later, we have zillions of regulation, compliance officers, many regulations. Is there any changes? Do we less financial crimes, less scandals? No. We have probably the same quantity, just get bigger.
Is having a long checklist of regulations perhaps even counterproductive in some sectors?
At the end, you can put all the regulations you want. If you don't have the people to apply and to support the people that are applying them, it will be a failure.
Yeah. Well, the great management thinker Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So in other words, the culture will always win out, whether it's a healthy one or a toxic one. But I think I will join with everyone watching in applauding you for your honesty and trying to improve the culture of the organisation you have worked in. I think we are out of time, is that correct? So while there are more questions, sadly we'll have to bring this to a close.
Xavier Justo, thank you for sharing your story. I wish you every success in your fight for justice.